Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Amateur Hour podcast. My name is Jacob and it's just going to be me on the episode today talking about the NBA Christmas Day games and what we learned from those games that took place yesterday. And there were some very exciting games. I was very excited to watch these games. There were some great games on hand. I was really looking forward to obviously being a Raptors fan, very much looking forward to watching them play on Christmas Day for the first time. That game was very exciting. Then obviously looking forward to the possible Eastern Conference final matchup between Milwaukee and Philadelphia. The Warriors game proved to be much more exciting than originally thought. I wasn't too concerned with that game initially. But then the Warriors all of a sudden upset the Houston Rockets. That was a great game. LA lived up to the hype. Tremendous game of basketball to watch, and then a bit of a lesser game near the end. But again, another upset in that one. But we'll just go in order of the games, what we learned from each of the games that took place yesterday, starting with the Boston-Toronto game. And I think the biggest takeaway that we can get from these, well, there's two big takeaways from this game. The first one being Kemba Walker is the best point guard in the East. And when it comes down to All-Star voting, he should be the number one for voting. He's been tremendous this season. He was tremendous against the Toronto Raptors. He put up great numbers, shooting 50% from the field, 50% from three, 22 points. Just a great player on the court, just hitting his shots. Tremendous, plus 23, he had a great game. Also kind of highlighted, not the big point I'm trying to make, but Kyle Lowry is definitely an all-star this season. Based on what we've seen from other point guards, he didn't have a tremendous game, but Kyle Lowry, I feel, should be an all-star as well. The second big takeaway from the Boston-Toronto game is that Jaylen Brown, who I gave a lot of criticism for, and I gave the Boston Celtics a lot of criticism for signing him to such a big contract in the summer, but Jaylen Brown has proven that he is the second best player on the Boston Celtics. And if you don't know me and you don't know this podcast, I have a big claim that Jason Tatum is the most overrated player in the NBA, which I'll get to him in a moment. But if you want to watch or listen to that podcast, it was earlier in the week, titled Jason Tatum, the most overrated player in the NBA. But anyways, Jaylen Brown has shown, especially in that Toronto game, that he is the second best player on the Boston Celtics. I know it's just one game. I know Jason Tatum had 39 points earlier in the week, but Jaylen Brown was unbelievable against the Toronto Raptors. He shot 10 for 13 from the field, 5 for 7 from 3, 30 points, just absolutely tremendous. The shots this guy was hitting were insane, just fadeaway jumpers. You thought he had no hope to hit. Drills it. Jason Tatum, on the other hand, went 5 for 18, 1 for 3 from 3, 28% from the field in that game. And like I've been saying about Jason Tatum, that mid-range game is not going to be good for a longevity of a career and for good performances. I know he had 39 against Charlotte, but when it came down to a somewhat good defense like the Toronto Raptors, and by the way, Jason Tatum playing at the 4 did not have to go against the Raptors' top player, Pascal Siakam, at the 4 slot. He had to go up against OG Anunoby instead. OG Anunoby, by the way, is a great defender in his own right, but did not have to go up against a true 4 like Pascal Siakam. And he still wasn't able to really capitalize. And Toronto didn't even have their top center, one of their best defenders, Marc Gasol, in the lineup either. So Jason Tatum really needs to understand that the mid-range game is more or less dead in the NBA. And I'm going to have an episode in the coming days, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, about statistically why the mid-range isn't good for the NBA and why you shouldn't be taking mid-range shots. But just for a little snippet, a little thing I want to say about that is you shoot 40% from mid-range. Well, teams shoot 40% from mid-range on average over the last decade. 40% from mid-range. Over the last decade, teams shoot about 34% from 3, 35% from 3 over the decade as well. That is the NBA average over the decade. So if you take 100 shots from each position, take 100 shots from mid-range, you hit 40 of them, you get 80 points. You hit 35 of your 100 shots from 3. Though you hit less and you don't hit them as often, the gap is small enough that the extra point per shot is significant. Because in that scenario, you get 105 points. And it's pretty ridiculous when you think about it, that a guy like Jason Tatum, who is deemed a superstar, is taking all these mid-range shots. And I get it's one game here, and I get he had a great game earlier in the week, but that game I don't think is going to transpire well over the course of the season and into the playoffs. So Jaylen Brown showcased that he is the second best player on the Boston Celtics. The last thing you can take away is that, well, I mean, you can't really say much about the Raptors, but those injuries are hurting them, and Fred VanVleet is still feeling his game out. I think Kyle Lowry is kind of back in his rhythm. He didn't have a great game against a strong defensive team like the Boston Celtics, but Toronto Raptors have two starters out, Gasol and Siakam, and there's basically the sixth-man Norm Powell is also out. So not going to fault them tremendously for that game. The next game we're going to talk about, we're going to go in order again, Milwaukee and Philadelphia. First thing we learned is that Giannis is human, and he is the MVP favorite at this point in the season, in my opinion. But 0 for 7 from 3, still put up 18 points, but 8 for 27 from the field, just about a 30% field goal percentage. Wasn't great, and a lot of it was down to that three-point shooting, didn't get him going, but even at the rim, missing a lot of shots. Philly played great defense, but that's a one-off. But, it is important because Giannis in the playoffs last year, when it got down to the nitty-gritty, when it got down to the difficult opponent, like the Toronto Raptors, he went quiet, and Kawhi kept in a little bit cold. So, this is kind of significant. I think that this will only hunger the Greek Freak even more for future games this season. And, Giannis is not one to stop going. This guy's a worker. He's hungry. I love the mentality he has. He'll airball a 3-on-1 play. Next play, 3 feet behind the line, drills a 3. He'll just keep shooting. He's not bothered. I like that mentality. And obviously it didn't work out yesterday against the 76ers, but still, we learned that he's a little bit human. 18 points, 14 rebounds. We're talking about this like it's a bad game. So that just shows you just what a specimen Giannis Antetokounmpo is. The second thing that we learned is that Joel Embiid has the ability to turn it on when he's in the mood. And he can turn it on to such a degree. 31 points, 11 rebounds, 11 for 21 from the field, hit all his free throws, and he hit half of his shots from three-point line, 3 for 6. When Joel Embiid's in the mood and he wants to get in the paint and get busy in the paint, this guy is an absolute force. He should be averaging numbers like this on a regular basis. He should be averaging at least 27 points, 10 rebounds at this point in his career. And it just kind of pains me to watch, from a neutral's perspective, him ball out like this and just against such a tough opponent. But on a regular basis, he's not showcasing it with only 23 points per game. He is putting up a great deal of rebounds too, but we know Joel Embiid has another level he can unlock to his game, get busy in the paint like he did against Milwaukee. And this is what I want to see more often for Joel Embiid, and this is how they are going to be serious contenders when it comes down to it. Because I said Philly are my favorite to come out of the East. I don't know if I stick with that still, but this helps a lot for that take at the start of the season, because Milwaukee looks this season like they're the best team in the East, but when it comes to the playoffs, Philly might still be able to get it done. There's still a lot of season left if Philly can use this game to kind of spark them. But Joel Embiid needs to stay in this mood and stay this hungry in games for the rest of the season. Third and final thing is that Tobias Harris and Jason Tatum are on the same level of ability. And I'm not saying that Tobias Harris is rising up to the level of Jason Tatum, but we know how good Tobias Harris is. He's on a max contract, but we know he's not exactly worth that max contract. It's just that Philly kind of paid him just because they panicked after losing Jimmy Butler. But Tobias Harris and Jason Tatum, I talked a lot about Tobias Harris in that podcast about Jason Tatum, where I called him overrated. And I said that they're basically the same kind of player in what you're going to get from output for them. So Tobias Harris kind of showcased that. He played very well, shooting 5 for 7 from 3. He had a great game. And I said in that podcast that I would probably have Tobias Harris over Jason Tatum if I'm on a good team, because Tobias Harris can get his points without taking and hogging too many touches like Jason Tatum does and ruining some sets. But, if you want a more ball-dominant player, then Jason Tatum is your way to go. But Tobias Harris kind of showcased that he's on that Jason Tatum level of ability. Not quite the star, but still a good player. Third game on the list, the Houston Rockets versus the Golden State Warriors. I thought this was going to be an absolute blowout for the Houston Rockets, and especially because of the way James Harden has been playing. Unbelievable numbers he's putting up this season. But first thing we learned, and the most important thing, is that the Golden State Warriors live rent-free in James Harden's head. Because, I mean, you can say James Harden or the entire Rockets franchise, because over the course of the years, I believe they've beaten them 4 out of the last 5 years in the playoffs. And including last year, they lost in 6. I mean, in the 2018 Western Conference Finals, the Rockets were whining after that last game, after Game 7, where they missed 27 straight three-pointers. They were whining that if they had Chris Paul, they would have been able to beat the Golden State Warriors, and they think that championship in 2018 should have been theirs. But the next year, 2019 playoffs come around, Western Conference semifinals. The Golden State Warriors take down the Houston Rockets in 6 games without Kevin Durant playing for most of this series. Unbelievable. And then they get to this season, the Golden State Warriors are going to be one of the worst teams in the NBA, and they beat the Houston Rockets again. It is unfathomable thinking that the Golden State Warriors would have come out of that game on top. But they had a game. They won 116-104. Unbelievable that what the Warriors have, the mental toll that they take on the Houston Rockets. It's so funny to watch. And I love the whining that comes from Houston, that they think it should have been theirs, but when they didn't even get it done themselves a year after. And then this one is just the icing on the cake to that Game 6 loss to the Warriors last year. But the second thing we learned is that Russell Westbrook really needs to check himself, because on the season, shooting 23.8% from 3 in a Mike D'Antoni team where you're the one who has a license to get your own shots, that's not good enough. And only 42.6% from the field to go along with it. Yesterday against the Warriors, he shot 0 of 8 from 3. 0 of 8. Unbelievable. For a guy who's a former MVP, it's clear that James Harden doesn't really have that trust instilled in Russell Westbrook. And, I mean, over 8 in that game does not help the case in any way, because, there's some situations where Russ's guy will go and double Harden, and Harden will still be hesitant to pass the ball to a wide open Russell Westbrook. He might, James Harden sometimes thinks, who is more likely to score, me with 2 guys on me or Russell Westbrook wide open? And sometimes you probably think James Harden is the more likely to score, especially from three-point land. Russell Westbrook really needs to fix his game. I like I said at the start of the season, I don't think this duo is really going to work, and it's kind of showing that it's not quite working. Maybe Mike D'Antoni will be able to figure it out, but there's some problems in Houston that need to be addressed, certainly among that duo, because if they want to make that deep playoff push, they definitely need to fix those two, and they definitely need to fix Russell Westbrook's shooting. The last thing that we learned from this game, I mean, it's not something we didn't already know. The Warriors are still not a good team. They just had one freak game where guys like Damian Lee were balling out. It's not going to be a regular occurrence watching the Warriors play like this. It's just maybe they got hungry against the Houston Rockets team, who's had so much to say about them in the past, but they had 4 guys with at least 18 points. Like, Glenn Robinson is not going to get 18 points on a regular basis. Neither is Damian Lee, who had 15 rebounds to go along with his 22 points. Unbelievable display from those guys. It's not going to occur regularly. Don't worry about the Golden State Warriors. Next on the list, the feature event of the day, the Clippers versus Lakers at Staples Center. I was looking forward to this game all year. As soon as the schedule came out, I was looking forward to this game, and it did not disappoint. First thing we learned, LeBron needs to sit out to rest that groin injury, I believe it is, because 2 for 12 from 3. He only got hot late in the game. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he had 12 points going into the fourth quarter, finished with 23 points. 37.5% from the field. Again, he needs to work on those free throws. Missed one late in the game. 2 for 12 from 3. Now that is just awful. But, I think he could use that period. I know he wants to be that Iron Man, but is it really worth it to risk that injury, not rest it up for the bigger games? Because this kind of reminds me of the 73-9 Warriors, who even late in the season they wrapped up the first seed in the NBA, but still they wanted that record, and I think it showed late in the postseason when they blew that 3-1 lead to the Cavaliers that they ran out of juice going to that. So LeBron kind of talks about, if I'm healthy, I'm playing every single game, but I think they need to kind of limit him for a little stretch just to rest up that groin so he's 100% healthy, playing to his max ability, because he can do better than this. And after that pretty poor display in the first game against the Clippers, we wanted a little bit extra from LeBron. I mean, again, we're talking about a guy who almost put up a triple-double yesterday in bad vein. Obviously, LeBron is he's the king, and he's the GOAT in my opinion. So I just think he wasn't quite healthy, and the free throws are a big thing, because we saw in the last play of the game, Patrick Beverley with that incredible swipe on that potential game-tying 3 from LeBron, and eventually LeBron accidentally tipped it out of bounds. But the fact that Patrick Beverley was confident enough, because LeBron wasn't shooting well, Patrick Beverley was confident enough to swipe at LeBron, risking a foul, because he wants to make LeBron shoot from the free throw line, even if he messes up the swipe. He eventually got it, because Patrick Beverley's a tremendous defender, D'ing up a guy like LeBron James. Tremendous. But even if he gets the swipe wrong, fouls LeBron. LeBron's got to hit 3 out of 3 of his free throws. And what we've seen so far this season, at 68% from the line, is that you can foul LeBron, and you can expect him not to make his shots. So LeBron needs to fix up a tiny little bit. He is an MVP candidate, and he's my favorite for MVP. Oh, he was going to this season, but not quite anymore because of the way Giannis is playing. But LeBron, I think, could use a period, just a very short period, maybe a couple games, just to rest up that groin. Next thing we learned is that the Clippers stay favorites for the NBA championship, like I said at the start of the season. Their ability in close games like this to lock up the opposition team, especially a star-studded opposition team like the Lakers, is tremendous. Because like I said about that Pat Bev block, that's an unbelievable defensive play, and that's a game-changing play potentially. These guys are dogged on defense. You've got guys like Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, Pat Bev, all coming at you to close out games. It is going to be an absolute force, and it's going to be very difficult to be able to combat that late in games, especially in playoffs when Kawhi Leonard is in playoff mode, which he showcased last night. Kawhi Leonard can be the best player in the world when he needs to be. He has such an ability to rise up to the big occasion, and under the lights at the Staples Center on Christmas Day, 35 points, 12 rebounds, 11 for 9 from the field, 5 for 7 from 3. Unbelievable display from the reigning Finals MVP. This is the kind of stuff that if Kawhi shows on a regular basis, he could be MVP, but too much load management. But when it comes to playoffs and Kawhi's rested up, he can be dangerous, because like I said, he'll rise up to be the best player in the world when he needs to be. I still think Giannis is the MVP candidate, but if we're talking about talent, there's a definite case for Kawhi being the best player in the world currently on his day. But I probably still give the edge to Giannis and LeBron, but hey, Kawhi is right in that mix, and when he wants to be, he can be that best player in the world. Final thing about the game, we learned that Kyle Kuzma has the worst style in the NBA, because that haircut and that pregame outfit was just utterly ridiculous. I mean, just Kyle, look in the mirror today, and you got a couple of days to sort out what's going on there, boss. Final game we're going to talk about, the last game of the day, the Denver Nuggets against the New Orleans Pelicans. A big shock that the Pelicans came out with the victory in this game, because I believe they had lost 16 in a row, something ridiculous. Oh no, they beat the Pelicans. Before that, I think they lost 13 in a row. Then they lost to the Warriors. They beat the Blazers. Sorry, they had a losing streak going. It's clearly, they clearly don't have that losing streak anymore. But anyways, beat the Blazers, and then they just beat the Nuggets 112-100. The Nuggets, who were on, I believe it was a 7-game winning streak going into that game. The Nuggets, who sit second in the Western Conference. And what we learned about this game is that Jrue Holiday remains a tremendous trade asset because he is talented, and the Pelicans are looking to shop him because he doesn't really fit that young dynamic, that up-and-coming team they want. And, they're in rebuild mode, especially with Zion injured, Lonzo not playing quite well, but Brandon Ingram's still balling. But anyways, about Jrue Holiday, you got teams like, he's a great trade asset for teams like, I think Miami could really use him. I think that the Minnesota Timberwolves, who really don't have a good backcourt defense because they're running Jeff Teague and Jarrett Culver. Those guys aren't really great anyways. Adding Jrue Holiday into that mix would make them much better, especially on defense. And I even think the Denver Nuggets could really have taken the opportunity yesterday to scout a guy like Jrue Holiday, because I think they could definitely use him. Jrue Holiday yesterday put up great numbers, put up 20 points, 4 rebounds, 8 assists, 8 for 18 shooting. And since he's on the trade block, Denver have struggled, especially last year, defending from the guard positions, because against a guard-dominant team like the Trailblazers, they lost. And it's in a series that they probably could have won because they had the inability to defend from the guard positions like Jamal Murray. So a guy like Jrue Holiday would fit seamlessly into that Denver Nuggets system, first of all, and he would add tremendous defense to that backcourt. And I think that would be a great pickup for the Denver Nuggets that they should definitely consider. But Minnesota and Miami should also be looking at a guy like Jrue Holiday. I'm thinking more so Minnesota and Denver, you could say Miami as well for that mix. We also learned that Brandon Ingram is a baller. We didn't learn that, we already knew that, but reiterating, Brandon Ingram has been balling this season. Exciting player to watch. Very KD-esque in the way he plays. Obviously not quite on that KD level because KD is KD. But Brandon Ingram hooping this season. Next thing we learned, Jamal Murray, I think, after signing that max contract in the summer, we did do an episode earlier in the year on that contract. We talked about it. We didn't do a specific episode on it, but we talked about it in an episode. And what we said, basically to sum it up, was that Jamal Murray was not currently worthy of that contract, but they're paying him for what he's going to become. And so far, he has not really progressed. He is putting up very similar numbers. In fact, he's declined in some numbers. He's only 22, but last year he averaged 18.2 points. This year he's averaging 17.5. Not a big deal. The exact same field goal percentage, 43.7, which is pretty tremendous. It is dead even at the moment. And the three-point percentage, however, has dropped. It's gone from 36.7 to 32.5. And for a guy who got that contract, that max contract, and is supposed to be the number 2 guy on this deep and stable Denver team, we want a little bit more from a guy like Jamal Murray. And I think that we can get it. We just need to be able to see that come to fruition to a degree. Because, yesterday he put up 8 points. It can really be better. It can really be more, especially against a team like the New Orleans Pelicans. I know that, Lonzo's a good defender, but it leaves a little bit to be desired when you only put up 8 points, 4 rebounds, and 3 assists, especially on 2 for 10 shooting. I'm waiting for that jump, and I like Jamal Murray a lot, especially because he's Canadian, but we can see that. We can definitely need to see a little bit extra from him. The last thing we learned from this game is that Nikola Jokic is back. And he was awful to start the season. But yesterday, 23 points, 10 rebounds in a losing effort, though. 8 for 20 from the field. This is the Jokic that we wanted to see. And Jokic has historically been a very slow starter. And it's largely down to his off-season habits not being the healthiest. And when he gets 20 games, 30 games under his belt and he starts to shave off that extra weight, he really becomes himself again. And I think that's what we're seeing at this point. Once that weight started to get shaven off a little bit, he started to come up further and further, and we're going to see Jokic back to his best surely in no time. Probably that top center spot, on the first team All-NBA is going to be up for grabs, especially with the way Joel Embiid's been playing. Karl Anthony Towns has slowed down to a degree. I think Jokic still is a top candidate to take that spot. The way he's been playing recently showcases that he's been better. And as more and more weight gets lost on this behemoth European man, we'll see Jokic come back to his true form. But that's where we'll end it. So that's just my takes on what I saw from the Christmas Day games. Certainly some things, I mean, you can say it's just one game and it's not that big a deal. But this is what I saw, and this is what I feel given what transpired on Christmas Day 2019. But 5 tremendous games of basketball. It was definitely a spectacle to see. We'll end it there. Thank you for listening to the Amateur Hour podcast. If you are still here, you can like the video. You can subscribe to Amateur Hour Sports on YouTube. You can follow us on Twitter or Instagram at Amateur Hour PDC. You can follow on Spotify to keep updated with episodes because we post every single day to keep you up with the sporting world. We'll see you again tomorrow for another episode.